So for those listening, I've got Dwight this morning. So an award-winning marketing and brand specialist, former editor and journalist. So you've been at Betty and Taylors of Harrogate for more than 15 years, and 7 years of that, you've been Taylor's marketing director, and you and your team have grown Yorkshire Tea to become the UK's #1 tea brand. So as we were putting our research together for today, you've won many awards. So last year, 2023, you won the Marketing Society Award for Effective and Impactful Strategy. And you and your team were also awarded the Grand Effie at the 2023 Effie Awards. So you smashed it, I think, in 2023. We'll kind of be a brief summary of that. I know it's a very busy and very exciting year for you, and you ended the year by moving into a new role within the team at Taylors. So focusing on brand strategy, innovation, and diversification. So extremely grateful for you giving up the time to share some answers with me this morning, and many congratulations to you and the team, and to you for your new role.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster year. This is the moment I have to point out it's obviously a team effort, and not just my team, but our agency partners too, Lucky Generals and Good Stuff, who've just been tremendous. And we've been with them a long time. So I feel like a lot of this stuff has been a long time coming. But it's been a fun year.
Oh, that's lovely to hear. And, you know, hats off to your team and to the agencies you've worked with. It's a really lovely way to kind of to be rewarded. So firstly, we'll kind of dive straight in and go through the questions. I was curious as to what led you into marketing and brand roles, having previously been a journalist. You know, what was the catalyst for the switch?
The catalyst, that's a good question. I think I'm probably a really good case study for the whole squiggly career idea, because at university, I didn't have the intention of leaving and then going on to become a journalist. I was more interested in playing drums in the band that I was in. That was my passion. I didn't have kind of crazy ideas that we'd be rock stars one day. I think I just simply wanted that to be how I made my living and how I lived my life. But once we left university, the reality of it sunk in, and it was and making the thing that you love, that's fun, into what you do for a living and how you're going to earn money changes it quite a lot. So when the band moved down south, I chose to stay, and I was a bit bereft. You know, I needed a new creative outlet. I'd done English at university, and I knew I could write, but I didn't feel like a calling to do writing. But I just got talking to a friend who worked for a local magazine, and they asked me to write a few pieces, restaurant reviews and bar reviews, so really simple things. But I kind of threw myself into it because it was interesting, and I found it way more fun than I expected to. And they liked what I wrote, and I think the bit that's a bit less rock and roll is I think I was just very reliable. So if they contacted me, I replied quickly, and if they gave me a piece to do, I gave it to them on time, and it was usually pretty much print ready because I'd slaved over making sure I'd made no mistakes and I'd thought about it. So all of that was good build up for when there was an opening there. I got a job, and I was there for about 6 or 7 years, worked my way up to editor. We had a number of different titles, so there was a lot of skills I learned in that time that weren't just about writing, but they were also about editing and the total package. And I think the reason why I'm kind of laboring this point really is I just think I learned a lot in the world of magazines that I didn't realize was going to be useful later in brand and in marketing. But it was, you know, even simple things like if you imagine trying to design the front cover of a magazine and it's going to sit on shelf next to 500 other magazines, and it's got to grab people's attention, but more than that, it's got to make them pick it up and think, I might spend a few quid on this. It's I feel like that was a brilliant training ground for what came later for me. But the catalyst, to answer your question more specifically, was I think it was copywriting and then social media. So I'd started to diversify into copywriting because journalism is quite a low paid, insecure job unless you're a high flyer. Ended up getting a job as a copywriter for Betty's and Taylors, predominantly writing copy for Betty's and not doing very much for Yorkshire Tea. For the people that don't know Betty's, it's a small group of cafe tea rooms, really beautiful, really intimate and homely, but also quite swanky. So just and it's the perfect place to go for like afternoon tea on a cake stand with a silver teapot, all those things. But they have a website, they sell products online. So I spent my days trying to think of 100 different ways to describe different chocolates in 60 characters. And it was the advent of social media. So this is really 2008, 2009. That's when brands doing social media was really not a thing yet. And I just discovered people talking on this new thing called Twitter about Yorkshire tea. And what they said was really interesting. We found it, just this like rich seam of insight that was just waiting to be mined. So I set us up and gradually learned the ropes of how to be a brand on social media. And well, I think I had the luxury of a couple of years where the stakes were very low and nobody was monitoring me very much. So I had a lot of freedom to play, to get it wrong, to learn, to refine, which meant I think I got a very, very good handle on the brand, what the brand was all about, how people saw the brand. So when I was then brought into the marketing team and I gradually expanded my remit to cover all comms and then eventually all creative, that was my way in. But I do think the watch out with that story is I'm always conscious that I mean, particularly if you read Mark Ritson's columns, there's a real danger that marketeers focus too much on comms, and comms is absolutely my comfort zone and where I came from. So I think since I became marketing director in 2016, I've probably spent the last nearly 8 years, what's the right way to say this? Not atoning for my sins as a comms person exactly, but working very hard to make sure I cover the spaces where I maybe don't have enough experience or I don't have the the sort of scars from the harder nosed commercial end. Hopefully I'm a more rounded beast nowadays.
I think that's fascinating. So it's quite an organic journey, really, in many respects. There wasn't a sudden change for you to go into marketing and brand. I think that's absolutely fascinating. And I mentioned in the introduction about the fact that you and your team and the business had a superb year. 2023 was a very successful year, and I was curious, maybe what were some of your highlights from last year?
Harry, there were so many. So we had a really amazing year for a number of reasons. I guess business performance wise and brand performance wise, the brand had become the number one in the UK and past PG Tips and Tetley, who were the titans that we previously decades back thought we'll never get anywhere near them, and now we're a considerable way ahead of them. So that had already been and gone. But this year, I think what happened was just there was without really saying it to each other, I think there was a deliberate effort between particularly Lucky Generals, our creative agency, and also personally myself. I just felt like it was after COVID and after lockdown, I think there was a kind of hibernation inertia. So I'd spent so much time focused very inward, for good reasons, like looking after my team and looking after myself and things like that. But I just think it took a while to wake back up. And at the beginning of last year, I had a quite conscious intention to get out more, to go to more events, to say yes to podcasts more often and things like that. And it coincided, I think, with the guys at Lucky Generals thinking this feels like a milestone moment to go out and seek recognition for the things that Yorkshire Tea's achieved. And it all just felt like it fitted together brilliantly. So a highlight for this year has definitely been the excitement and the pride that I've seen in all of my team and agency partners around the awards that we've garnered. Another highlight for me has been actually getting out more and realizing how good it is for me to get out and speak to other marketing directors, to speak to other brand folks, to speak to other agency folk, and just get a sense of what is happening in the world, and are the ideas and worries swirling around my mind just my own unique, weird neuroses, or are they shared by other people, that kind of thing. So that my overall highlight is that getting out more and the kind of celebratory atmosphere around all these different awards. There are a couple of specifics. So personal highlight for me was when I was invited on Radio 4's The Bottom Line with Evan Davis. And I'm a long time Radio 4 listener, love Evan Davis, love that show. So to have Yorkshire Tea appear as a guest, the subject was talking about humor in advertising and why more brands don't use it. and with Yorkshire tea obviously being a great example of a brand that does use it, and hopefully you agree uses it well. So that was fab. That was a really, that was a kind of combination of brand achievement, but also personal achievement. I think a slightly different highlight, and if you haven't seen it, I would urge you to look it up. In the summer, Yorkshire Tea released a song. We've actually done this before. We've done kind of comedy music videos that we've done on YouTube, but this was our kind of biggest and best effort, and the first in a few years. But we made a song called Pack Your Bags, which is all about the idea of basically making fun / celebrating the weird habit that Brits have of taking tea on holiday with them, because when we're on holiday and we suddenly realize we can't get tea the way we used to at home, it can spoil the mood. So we created a summer banger that was all about a young lad packing his bags to go to Ibiza, riddled with lots of silly jokes and things. So it was a lot of fun to make, and it's landed really well. And the reception we got from both the industry and consumers has just been so overwhelmingly positive. It was lovely. And I guess finally, I didn't actually have much of a hand in that video. Like I signed things off, and I kind of gave people the encouragement, or gave them a bit of a air cover so that they felt like they had confidence to take risks. But really, it was my team and our agency teams at Lucky Generals who made that happen. And given that I'm moving into this new role, I think that's why that's a highlight for me, is the idea that I'm letting go of quite a lot of things, but I'm looking and seeing loads of evidence that what I'm leaving behind, that I've cared about and loved for a long time, is in really good hands.
I love that, and I absolutely love the Pack Your Bags song. I'm gonna watch that, because I will freely admit, one, I drink Yorkshire tea, and two, I travel a lot with work. So last year alone, I was in Cape Town, I was out in LA, spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and every time I go, I do honestly, because I drink decaf. I take my decaf Yorkshire tea with me, because the other tea just doesn't taste the same. So yeah, I am.
That's good.
That
Pleased to
is,
hear it.
yeah, that is me. That is me. So lots of really interesting things that you mentioned there, and one that kind of resonated with me was, you mentioned really good to get out and go to these events and meet like-minded people who are operating at your level, and all these kind of ideas that are whizzing around your head, and are they having the same things? That's why we run our events, and it's absolutely fascinating, because the reassurance people get of being in a room together where you're all peers, you're all at the same level, and obviously non-competing brands, but you all have the same challenges, opportunities, and it's good to kind of talk and bounce ideas off your peer group. So I'm glad you've done that. I'm glad that's worked out for you. So we talked about lots of success. How do you lead your team to deliver these campaigns?
Now these things might sound a bit flippant or superficial, but I just really think building an atmosphere where people feel trusted and respected, and I guess the sort of slightly more formal terminology would be psychological safety. But I think creating an atmosphere of psychological safety, without it then becoming a kind of too soft environment where we don't challenge each other, that's really the key for me, is working with it. This is true for both the team, but it's also true with how we work with our agencies. I think particularly if I think about our agencies, I know that we're not the biggest client, so we're not the client that's going to make our agencies the most money, but I hope that we are perhaps the most fun to work with, and that we're lovely, and that they look forward to the meetings they have with us, because they know they're going to be enjoyable meetings. But if that sounds a bit soft and fluffy, I think the other thing is, even though we're all lovely to each other, I think we all have this shared desire to make work we're proud of, and work that works. Which means that when we're crafting something together, I don't think we're soft on each other. I think we push the idea and challenge whether it's going to be funny enough, or whether it's going to get noticed, and all of those things. And a big part of that, and this is where it maybe goes back to the point about my team and not just agencies, I think the other thing we do is, well, this is a business-wide thing we do at Betty's and Taylor's, actually. we're an independent family business, and for quite a long time we've had this very conscious call out that relationships are really important to us. And I know that maybe sounds like something anyone would say, but you know, it's about what you do to back that up. And I think one of the things that we do is we've got a very explicit intent that when we come together, we focus on what we refer to as contact, but it's really just spending time together and making sure that we've got good relationships. So a small example would be when we have meetings, we don't just steam straight into point one on the agenda. In fact, point one on the agenda would be checking in with each other.
Yep.
You know, and sometimes that'll be really short and sweet, and it's just, did you have a lovely weekend, that kind of stuff. But other times we'll actually allow, if it, you know, maybe if you're going to meet with a group of people you haven't seen for weeks and you're going to spend a day together on something, then you might well invest like a whole hour at the beginning to just check in with each other, say what's on your mind, say how you're starting the day, say what you're hoping to get out of the day. And I've got so used to that whenever I work with people where in a different organization where they don't have that approach and they just steam in, I find myself just thinking, why do you think this is a good idea? This is crazy. Like we haven't established a rapport within the room that means we can then do great work. So I really value that. I think that's something that if I were to leave Betty's and Taylor's, I'd take with me forever, because I just think it's proven to be so powerful. So that's it. That's my key. I'm sure there are loads of other things that we do, but if I had to pick one distinctive thing, it's that focusing on investing in relationship.
I like that. I like that very, very much. And what drives you? You know, you've had huge success. What drives you to continued success in your career?
It's not money, both in terms of commercial success of the business and also myself. You know, like obviously, more money is helpful, but and I don't think it's even things like kind of conventional definitions of success. You know, like climbing the ladder and stuff. But for me, I think I don't think I could necessarily do what I do for the Taylors of Harrogate brands. So Taylors of Harrogate makes Yorkshire tea. That's what we're best known for. But we also make Taylors of Harrogate coffee and Taylors of Harrogate specialty tea. I don't think I could do what I do for those brands and products if I didn't wholeheartedly believe in them. So what drives me, I think, is and the more I gradually came to understand behind the scenes of Taylors and the work that goes into making those products such good products, the more passionate I felt about more people need to know about these things. And for Yorkshire tea in particular, I guess it's almost like you know, I'm an evangelist when it comes to Yorkshire tea. I will continue to market Yorkshire tea years after I don't work for them anymore. Because I think if you're going to drink a cup of tea, it just seems like a waste of life to drink something bad. And I know in my heart that Yorkshire tea is better. So that's that one part. That's the kind of product benefit part. The other bit is when I first joined Betty's and Taylor's, I had an inkling about this, but I learned very quickly that there was a side to the business that was about environmental and ethical responsibility. And one small example is that the family leaders who used to directly run the business, but now owners, but from a slight distance, they instigated a tree planting program where basically Johnny Wild, who previously ran the business, had said to his children, who were a bit upset after watching a Blue Peter program in the 90s about deforestation, if you can find a way to plant one tree, I will work with the business to find a way to plant a million. And then that, what was supposed to be kind of like a short-lived campaign, has turned into a kind of 35-year commitment to planting trees. And for me, that meant a great deal. And nowadays, I guess this is quite common. You know, there are businesses out there achieving B Corp certification because they know they need a sense of purpose. They need something that's going to bring in the young employees that want to believe in the place they work. So, sorry, that was a long answer, but in short, I think what drives me is feeling that the thing I'm trying to convince people that they should buy and enjoy is good for them, to convince them to buy and enjoy that, because they're going to enjoy that cup of tea better. But also, if they ever look behind the scenes and think, oh, is my money going to a good place, they'll find out that it is. That's what drives me.
No, that's a good answer. What about priorities? You know, I'm sure that you and your team will have a big to-do list, but I'm curious, what do you think will be the priority for senior marketers over the next few years?
It's once you start thinking about this subject, you know, it's bad sign, isn't it, if your list of priorities becomes very long, because then they're not really priorities. But you know, because there's certain things it's very easy to bandy about the term AI, but the truth is, you know, if you think back to, what is it, 14, 15 years ago, when nobody walked around with a smartphone in their hand, and now we all have these incredibly powerful computers practically attached to our bodies. And I think that revolution is nothing compared to what AI is going to do in terms of the speed with which we'll be able to do things, figure things out, and also the dangers it represents. So I think, because of my time in social media, I'm particularly preoccupied with subjects like disinformation, fake news, and it worries me that people can already become very easily brainwashed, or deluded, or just become very argumentative with other people because of unreliable information. Imagine what that's going to be like when that information is indistinguishable from the truth because of the, you know, the clever ways that AI can make a video look real and all those things. So that might sound maybe a bit removed from marketing, but I suppose these sort of forces do end up shaping the world, and they shape consumer behavior. So I just think maybe the communications landscape and the information landscape and societal division, they all feel like things we're going to need to keep a really close eye on, lest we get kind of swept up, you know, and taken over by it. So that's one thing. I think the other one for me would be, and apologies if these are all a bit apocalyptic. I am actually quite a happy, optimistic person, but it's quite hard at the moment, isn't it, to avoid the conflict in the world? You know, Russia, Ukraine, Israel,
Yeah.
Gaza, and now Yemen. You know, and Yemen and the Red Sea is relevant for another reason for us, because of shipping. Shipping's unbelievably crucial to the smooth running of our business. So I've got this real you know, imminent and tangible example of how this volatile and uncertain world is making planning and executing your plan really hard. So I suppose maybe I could wrap all of those things together and say I think the priority is just being really, really aware that the world is not becoming less volatile, it's becoming more so. And therefore, marketeers getting better at having a variety of scenarios and being agile whilst not losing the importance of strategic thinking is probably how I'd sum it up.
Wow, that's a very comprehensive answer. Thank you for that one. And finally, we talk a lot about mindset when we do these video podcasts, and you know, I'm a firm believer that positive mindset is absolutely essential, and typically all of the senior leaders that we speak to will have very positive mindset. So are there any hints or tips or daily habits or practices that you have with regards to positive mindset that you could share that would be helpful to others?
I don't think anything I could offer is kind of like life guru level. You know, that most of the things I'd say would probably be quite obvious, but I can definitely sort of share from a personal point of view what I've learned about myself. And you know, there are certain things that are obvious, so just like sleeping well, and regularly, so trying not to have an erratic sleep schedule. That could sound unbelievably basic, but I think there's some fab books out there writing on the importance of sleep and why we sleep and all those things. And I just think that's almost step number one to making sure you have a healthy, well-functioning brain. And what could be more important than that for people who work in marketing, where it's all about our brains? The key one for me that I think I've come back round to realizing is reading. So I make more time now to read books that aren't related to what I do for a living. So I will read a mixture of non-fiction but also make sure that I've got time for fiction. And so just in the last couple of months, I read an amazing book by Jonathan Haidt called The Righteous Mind. I think the book's about 8 or 9 years old, but it's basically about moral psychology. So this is around, why do people who are kind of equally good end up at each other's throats and divided by politics or religion and so on. Like, what is it about the human mind that makes us get to that state? So I found that fascinating, and it wasn't too it wasn't too highbrow book. It wasn't a
Yeah.
slog to read. But then the other thing I've been reading recently is some Chinese science fiction. So there's a author
Pretty
called,
diverse mix of books then.
but I suppose that was the point I wanted to make, was I think reading a more diverse range of books, I've just felt like it's like fertilized my mind. And I've noticed that my lateral thinking abilities feel like they've got better. Yeah, The Three Body Problem by Xin Liu, which is might sound incredibly obscure, but I think in about a year's time it's going to be very mainstream, because the people that made Game of Thrones, the TV show, that's the thing that they're next adapting for Netflix. So there's going to be a Netflix show based on this book, The Three Body Problem, and I think it's coming out in the next couple of years. But it's it's a high level of geekery because it's a science fiction book, but it's mind blowing, and it's full of so many kind of crazy ideas that it's like it's a page turner, but not in that kind of usual sort of thriller way. It's a page turner in the sense of, oh, this, I just need to understand where this idea is going. So I think that's been a real learning for me, because I think one of the things, it probably doesn't matter whether you're in marketing or any other kind of leadership role, time is so precious.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to end up filling your time with all the stuff that must be done that feels very important. And things like reading fiction can end up feeling like luxuries that I'll get to that another time when I'm less busy, and obviously that will never happen. I think that's my thing, is making a conscious effort to ensure that my time contains pockets of doing things that are good for my brain and good for my happiness, because I know that it will come back around to making me better at my job.
How very true. And that is a top tip, and definitely one that you definitely want to do for this year. Thank you for that, Dom. Thank you. Some absolutely fabulous answers, and a pleasure to have you on this morning and understand a bit more about you. Thank you, much appreciated.
Thanks, Susie. Really enjoyed that.